All right, so we are officially live on YouTube. Not only are we live right now, but we are also ahead of schedule. How about that? Pretty incredible that we are 2 minutes ahead of time. Excited to do the sponsored content bootcamp here with you guys today. It's going to be a great 4 sessions. These sessions, we're going to dive deep into certain topics. You've maybe seen the schedule, but for this first session, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing in on the pricing mechanisms for sponsored content. Then we're going to look at some marketing tools. We're going to talk about Pinch of Yum's process for sponsored content, and then we're going to be doing a Q&A session at the end of the day. So right now, we're just kind of hanging out for a little bit. We're waiting for everybody to come in. At this point, we have already 181 people that are coming in, which is really exciting because we haven't even officially gotten to the time where we've started yet. We're starting in 1 minute. And when we do start, we'll have a little intro period as we wait for people to come in. So at this time, we have exactly 184 people, which we're super excited about. The other thing that I'm excited about is Sage is joining us here today. You can see that she is posting out using the couch as a bed. So excited that Sage is going to be part of today's session. Sage, really nice of you to join us here today. And we're going to be starting in just a little bit. So we are ahead of schedule right now. So for those of you that are here, you are 1 minute early, and you get a gold star for your early arrival. We're just going to be hanging out for a couple minutes as people start to arrive in. And if you can see the video right now, what I want you to do is give me a, oh yeah, or gotcha in the chat area. And that'll let us know that you can see the video, that we are coming through loud and clear on the other end. And I will keep an eye on the chat here. And once there it is, gotcha. It's interesting to see who picks what. Oh yeah, and gotchas. I would be a gotcha guy. If that was me, I would be a gotcha. I am here. So we are hanging out here, Sage and I, and in a little bit, we're going to be playing our session with Danielle. So maybe as we're waiting for just a couple more minutes, what I want you to do is share if you have a pet. So do you have a pet? Did you have a pet growing up if you don't have one right now? And what your pet's name is. So our pet is Sage. She's in the background hanging out, snoozing a little bit. But would love to hear from you. Who's your pet? Do you have one? Or if you didn't, did you have one growing up? So Sage is our pet, and we love her to death. She's the best. We're going to be starting in just a couple minutes, and today's session is on how to price your sponsored content. We're going to be talking about sponsored content, why it's such an important topic. And for those of you that aren't familiar with sponsored content, we're going to dive deep into some of the other sessions. We're going to be talking about some of the marketing tools that you can use. That's the session that we're doing later today. That'll be the second session. And then we're also going to be talking about some of the processes that Pinch of Yum uses. We're going to be doing that in the third session today. We're going to have Jenna and Lindsay from Pinch of Yum on. And in the fourth session, at the end of the day, we're going to be doing a Q&A session. So we're going to be hanging out here just for a couple more minutes. I have a computer off to the side here that I'm using to track the chat. We have 250 people here, which we're super excited about, here to learn about sponsored content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. We are 2 minutes in. I'm going to jump in, and Sage, I think, is going to hang out with us here for the rest of the day, or maybe just for this session. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to show you some slides and just talk a little bit about the overview of what you can expect today from the Sponsored Content Bootcamp, the first session here today. So let's go ahead and jump over, and we'll take a look, and then we'll jump over after this into the actual content for the day. So when you can see this screen, let me know in the chat, and you can say, got it. And that will let me know that you can see this, and then we'll start walking through. So today's session is session number 1, and it is all about pricing your sponsored content. It's one of the most difficult things for getting started with sponsored content, is knowing what is the price point that you need to start with when you're working with a brand or a PR agency? How do you even get to that point? What are the different things that you need to factor in? So the agenda here, we're going to do some quick introductions. We're going to talk about how to price your sponsored content. That's going to be kind of the meat and potatoes. Love to use a food analogy as much as possible. This is going to be the meat and potatoes here for the first session. We're going to do a Food Blogger Pro walkthrough. So if you're not familiar with what Food Blogger Pro is or how it works, we're going to do that. And we have this thing called a bootcamp bundle. So today it's the sponsored content bootcamp. We have something called the bootcamp bundle that we're offering people that are a part of this bootcamp. We're going to be talking about what that is and why that's so awesome. And then we're going to be doing a quick reminder for the Q&A that's going to be happening at the end of the day. So first, though, let's do this. Let's go ahead and say hello. So introduce yourselves. Let us know your name, where you're watching from today, and then your blog or your company or your brand name. So you can go ahead and put that in the chat area. My name is Bjork Ostrom. And I'm going to be talking more about what we do. I am broadcasting from St. Paul, Minnesota today. And Food Blogger Pro is what I do along with Pinch of Yum. One quick tip that I wanted to let you know about before we jump in. So some of you might be hearing a ding constantly as you're chatting. You can actually mute that by hitting this little button down here, that little mute button. And that will allow you to turn off the sound so you're not getting constantly inundated with little blips and things like that as you are chatting. And that will make it a lot more pleasant to listen to this broadcast in this webinar. Who are we? Well, there's two of us. It's just me right now. But a little bit later on, we're going to be welcoming Lindsay as well as Jenna from Pinch of Yum. So Lindsay and I are married, so partners in business and life. And we also have Sage, our dog, who is, as you can see, napping behind me as well. And we run two sites primarily, along with a couple other smaller sites. One is Pinch of Yum. It's a food blog. It's where Lindsay shares recipes, talks about her life a little bit, and also shares some resources and advice and insight and things like that for people that are in the food recipe space. And then we have Food Blogger Pro. And Food Blogger Pro is for people that want to start, grow, and monetize your food blog. We also have people that don't have a food blog that are part of that. I usually estimate to say it's maybe like anywhere from 10 to 20%. 25% maybe at the high level of people that don't have a food blog that are part of Food Blogger Pro. But we have a lot of food bloggers. That's really what we focus on. And it's a membership site to teach people the things that we've learned as we've grown Pinch of Yum. But it's not just us today. We're also going to be working with Danielle. Danielle's going to be presenting the main part of today's presentation. And I'm going to switch over to that in a little bit. And she's going to be talking about how to price your sponsored content. She has a awesome background that she's going to talk about that's really, really helpful in pricing sponsored content. She used to work for a company called Fitfluential and did a lot of this. But now her and her business partner, Jamie, have two different sites that they run. One is called #legal. So as you get into blogging, you're going to learn there's a ton of legal stuff that you have to figure out. What does it mean to set up an LLC and review contracts and all of that stuff? And some attorneys, most attorneys probably won't understand this world. So they created a company around advising people as attorneys from a blogging perspective. They really get it. So they created #legal for that. They also have a company called Businessese. And for Businessese, they have a couple different courses. We've gone through those. Actually, the Pinch of Yum team has. And they also have some services where they'll really help you with setting up different contracts or getting things in place that are important for the blog side of your business. So check out both of those sites. And at the end, we're actually going to be talking about a discount that you get that's tied into the Food Blogger Pro Bootcamp bundle. So really quickly, why sponsored content? What's the importance behind sponsored content? Well, there's really a couple different reasons that I'm super excited about sponsored content. The first is display advertising, like those banner ads that you see on a website. Those are a good way to create an income if you have a huge traffic site. But the thing is, display advertising is becoming less effective over the long term. And brands are noticing that. The impact that they get for the amount of money that they spend is going down. And so brands are looking for other places that they can put their money and invest their marketing dollars. And one of the places they're putting that is into sponsored content. Another thing that people say for this is influencer marketing. This is the place where you can, where brands work with people that have a following or have an audience, whether on their blog or social media, and they can partner with them for that brand or for that influencer, for that blogger, for that social media person to talk about their product. And that's becoming a really effective way for brands to promote their product and to get in front of users. I call it attention economics. There's a lot of attention that's being given in these areas. So what does that look like for Pinch of Yum? We've seen that slow and steady shift where sponsored content working with brands is becoming a more and more, it's becoming a bigger part of our revenue pie. So if you look at a blog and let's say you earn $1,000 a month, a while ago, years ago, 50% of that or 75% of that might have been advertising income. But what we're seeing now is sponsored content. Influencer marketing is becoming a bigger part of that. And the reason is because brands are starting to recognize that. They're investing more into it. They're putting more of their dollars towards sponsored content and influencer marketing. I also like sponsored content because it's the elephant versus the rabbit, or the rabbit versus the elephant, as I have it here. And what I mean by this is, so a rabbit is like, there's lots of little tiny rabbits, right? And that's a good thing. Maybe you have a rabbit farm and you have to take care of lots of rabbits, and who knows what your business is with them, but chances are you can't just have one rabbit if you have a rabbit business. But with an elephant, that's kind of like sponsored content. It's a lot. It allows you to create more income from your blog or have more revenue from your blog and not have to manage as many small interactions. You just have one really big interaction. You have one paycheck from a brand. It's probably good to have a little bit of both, but sponsored content and influencer marketing is a really important piece of that. It's a really big piece of that puzzle. And brands are seeing this. So businesses are making $6.50 for every $1 spent on influencer marketing. So they're getting a really good return on that. And they know that. They're getting better at tracking that as well. And 59% of marketers intend to increase their influencer marketing budget in the next year. So this is an area where people are not spending less year to year, they're spending more. They're putting more money into their influencer marketing and their sponsored content. So this is a place where marketers are saying, this makes sense for me to invest more dollars in. And for a blogger, for a content creator like you, that means it's a good area for you to focus on because it's a growth area. If you're looking to create an income from your blog, this is going to be an area where you can do that. So with those things in mind, we're going to jump in and we're going to start our session today with Danielle Liss, and she's going to be talking about how to price your sponsor content. So I'm going to switch over. This was a previously recorded session that I had with Danielle Liss. And so what I'm going to do is while this is happening, I'm going to be able to jump over. I'm going to be part of the chat. And there's going to be questions that you maybe have coming up. Danielle's going to be able to join us throughout the day, just kind of in the chat. I don't know if she's in right now. I haven't checked yet. So you could maybe interact with us in chat, but also there's a URL that you can go to, and we will put that in the chat periodically. And I think it's foodbloggerpro.com/sponsored-content-questions. And at the end of the day, we're going to be doing a sponsored content Q&A session. So if you have questions, that would be the best place to go for that. And I can't believe that Sage is still passed out on the couch behind me. That's just too awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to start the session with Danielle Liss, where she's going to be talking about how to price your sponsored content. So I'm going to jump over and I'm going to press play on this. Let me know on your side if you can hear it. Give me a thumbs up or an oh yeah once you get that coming through. All right, here we are. It is the official presentation time. This is the fun part. We're jumping into the content, and we have Danielle Liss from Businesses and #Legal. So excited to have you on, Danielle.
I am very excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be fun to talk about some of this stuff. And the most important thing probably with sponsored content is this first thing that we're going to be talking about. And it's this idea of pricing content. And we hear this all the time where people come to us and they say, how much should I price my content? Or what is the starting point for pricing content? We're going to be talking about that today. So I'm going to switch over here so we can see your slides and we're going to talk through it. So I'm going to pass it off to you.
Great. Well, so people know a little bit about my background. I am the former chief marketing officer of an influencer network. And during that job, day to day, I was the person who was setting the rates for people. And when I left that role and we started working more with really trying to help influencers build their business and scale and make more money, we realized that pricing was a huge hurdle for people. And we constantly were asked, can you just tell me how much to charge?
Mm-hmm.
And the question always became, well, it depends, which is the worst lawyer answer ever. And I give it all the time. It's always, but maybe, I don't know, it depends.
Right.
Sorry. So what we decided to do was to come up with a framework this is not a formula. And that's what I'm going to tell people from the start. There is no secret formula, unfortunately, when it comes to pricing, but we're going to give you a framework so that you kind of work through it. And the first thing that I want to do is see if this resonates for anyone who is watching, because these are things that we hear all the time, whether it's in our Facebook group, when we're tagged from other people, or just when we're at conferences. So I'm not sure how much to charge for my sponsored content. Someone in a Facebook group said to use this formula with my page views, but the number just didn't seem right.
Mm-hmm.
How many people have seen that formula where it's like your page views, and I think it still involves PageRank, which I don't believe is available anymore, but it's still a number that's being passed around. I talked to another blogger with numbers close to mine, and our rates are so different. Which one of us is right?
Yeah.
This is such a hard conversation to have because the rates are such a personal thing.
Yeah. And we hear that all the time and feel it too. Like for us in the content business, we hear from people and they're like, oh, you're charging this much, you got to be charging more. Or like on the opposite side, not as common, like, oh, you're charging this amount. Like, I don't charge as much. Should I charge more? So I can totally relate to that.
And I'll hear some people who are like, well, my audience is, similar numbers to what this person is, yet they're charging like 3 times what I do.
Right.
And then when we kind of walk through the questions and we walk through the framework, then they realize, okay, now I see why they're charging me. I'm charging more than me.
Great.
So of course, the next one, why isn't there a secret formula to make this easier? And oh, don't we all wish there was?
Yeah.
This is a big one. And we are huge on helping influencers scale their business. Like that is something I am passionate about. I don't want people to think of themselves as, oh, it's just a hobby where I can't make any money. We know that this is scalable. And so often people feel like they're leaving money on the table, but they don't want to scare away potential clients by setting their rates too high. Big one.
Yeah.
So our message for everyone is that influencer marketing has changed, even though the old formulas haven't changed along with it. And that's your pricing really needs to reflect who you are and what your channels have to offer. Your site, when I hear people comparing themselves to other people, no one else out there is Pinch of Yum. So no one should be basing what they do exactly off of what you do at Pinch of Yum. It's just not the same thing. And your pricing should be individually reflecting of what you are. And so important, everybody, your rates should be about more than just your numbers. Way too frequently, I still hear a lot of talk about page views, and I'm throwing that out. I don't like using page views as the basis. I think that we should be talking, when we're talking about sponsored content, if you're talking about ads, which are more about how many times it's being displayed, then you're going to talk about page views.
Sure.
But when you're talking about sponsored content, it's about how many people are going to see that content. So you'll see that reflected within our framework.
That makes sense. And to go back just real quick, for those that aren't, I'm guessing most people are familiar with this, but for those that aren't, can you talk a little bit, Anielle, about influencer marketing broadly, like what that could be defined as, and like the big umbrella of influencer marketing? I'm sure most people understand it, but just kind of at a high level, what is that?
I think at the broadest level, influencer marketing is when a brand comes to someone because that person has an audience that they have some type of pull with, where they can make a recommendation about a product. And they want that product or message, depending upon what it is, because sometimes it may be a charity who's interested in having, just what their message is known, as opposed to a specific tangible product type of thing. And they want that to be shared. And it breaks down into so many different ways. I mean, really, it's been around forever because we see spokespeople doing commercials and things like that. But where it's changed the most in recent years is it started with bloggers, of course, and then as other channels have increased, particularly Instagram, I think we've seen, and now Facebook, Facebook kind of was in play and then faded a little bit. And now with Facebook Live and the Tasty Style videos, is there another thing that people call those?
No, I know what you mean. It's kind of this weird, it's kind of like the Kleenex of influencer marketing, where people just call it Kleenex. But like the overhead recipe videos,
I one time tried to come up with a name that wasn't Tasty Style, and it was like 15 words long.
Right.
And I said, you know what? Everybody knows what I mean when I say Tasty Style.
Yeah, the
So,
overhead videos with hands in, fast-paced videos for recipes.
the things that I could watch all day
Yeah,
long.
for sure.
And I don't cook.
Mhm.
So it just shows you like the sway that you have. I'll go out and buy all the ingredients, but will I make any of it? No, I will
Yeah,
not.
right. Yeah,
So
got it.
but
So the
that's
basic
really
idea is
where
marketing through people that have influence, and a huge area of influence is social media. So,
Exactly.
or a blog or a brand, and it's kind of taking
Yes.
all of those things in consideration. Got it. Great.
think of it as it is truly word of mouth marketing through some other channel. So you may not be talking directly to somebody, but really social media is how we often talk directly to people now.
Yep. Great. Cool. Okay. I think that's good to kind of define that. So jumping back in here, we're kind of talking about this pricing method
Yes.
or the price method.
Yes, this is the framework that we created, and it's a 5-step method to give you different areas that you should look at when you are setting your pricing. And like I said, it is not a formula. When we get to the end, I can give you some guidance on numbers that you can kind of use as your starting point, but it's going to be different for every person. And the goal here is as you are going through each campaign, unless you have an identical type of campaign where they're saying, this is an ingredient and we want you to create a recipe featuring this ingredient and the deliverables are exactly the same, it's unlikely you're always going to have the same factors and the same pricing. One thing that I always tell people is make your pricing fluid. Your pricing should reflect different times of the year. Like as we're talking about fourth quarter, your prices go up because the demand is much higher. So always consider those things. And that's just keep your pricing fluid to make sure that you are giving both your sponsors and yourself the best possible rates.
Yeah, I think that's such an important takeaway. I think that's when we were talking before, one of the things that I took away was like, oh yeah, it doesn't have to be the same throughout the year. And I was talking with somebody who has a gear blog or gear website for like outdoor enthusiasts. And he's like, yeah, quarter four, like you said, for us is a really important quarter. And it dawned on me like, of course, like people have more in their advertising budget. They're needing to get through that. They're saving it for this quarter. So it makes sense as a influencer that you're going to change that in the fourth quarter. So for those that aren't familiar, fourth quarter being October, November, December, a lot of people are spending money, including consumers, which is why advertisers spend more there as well.
Exactly. I tell people up your rates in fourth quarter. And then depending upon what area you're in, Q1 may be a little bit slower, but for if you're a healthy living type of food blogger, that may actually Q1 might be busy because they're trying to reach the New Year, New You crowd.
Sure. Yep. January New Year's resolution.
Exactly. So if that's the case, then keep your rates stable. A lot of people find that Q2 gets a little bit slower. So I tell people you may want to decrease your rates a little bit during Q2 and really plan for Q2 to be the time of year when you are doing your sort of administrative upgrades and really concentrating on that aspect. So look at it more holistically throughout the year and start to figure out when are you busiest and when are you getting the most inquiries. And that also can influence when you're doing your pitches too.
Got it. Great. So talk to us about the price method. What is this all about and how does it work?
Yep. So the 5 factors are potential impressions, reach, investment, content, and engagement. And we're going to walk through what each of those means, how to measure it, and what it means for how you set your pricing.
Awesome.
One thing I always tell people, as you're looking at this, you're going to see certain areas where you're like, that's me. That is what I am good at. Those are your strengths. Always know what your strengths are because your strengths are really going to influence how you market yourself. And so if your reach is outstanding, you're going to really use that when you're pitching people. So as you go through these, start to think about, oh, maybe my potential impressions aren't great, but my content is amazing. Or even though I'm a mid-level blogger, my engagement is phenomenal. So just kind of keep that in mind as we review these.
That's great.
So first we start with the P, which is potential impressions. And that's the total number of people who would see your content if everyone in your audience sees what you post. And I think we know that does not happen.
Yeah.
So maybe you get a viral post and it exceeds that, but it's unusual. So how to measure potential impressions is pretty easy. You take for Facebook, it's going to be your likes. For Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, those types of channels, it's going to be your followers. And for your blog, you're going to use your monthly users. So remember, we're looking at how many people could possibly see it. We are not using page views. So using the example on the screen, this person's potential impressions are 245,000.
Great.
One thing I want you to remember is if you have a brand who comes to you and says, I need to do a campaign that is one blog post and Facebook. You then need to take out Twitter, Pinterest, and Instagram from the potential impressions, because that's not going to be a factor anymore. If you're not going to be using that channel, please don't consider that when you're measuring what those potential impressions are.
Got it. And so for those that aren't familiar, can you talk really quickly the difference between users and page views?
Yes. Page view is each time any page is clicked on, it's counted as a view. So let's say I'm in one of my recipe binge phases and I go to Pinch of Yum and I say, I'm going to read the entire back catalog because I am stuck in the carpool lane and I'm not moving, which has maybe happened before. And then I may go through 20 or 30 pages, but I'm still just one person.
Sure.
So that would be 30 page views versus one user. So that's how we want you to think of it. And you should be using those measurements on Google Analytics, which I believe is now, it used to be labeled as unique monthly visitors. Is that right? It was UMV was the kind of the industry standard term. But now I believe it's labeled as users or visitors.
Okay. Yep. And we can double check that. And during the live presentation, we can put it in the chat. So,
yep.
Great.
So next is reach. I think reach is way more important than potential impressions, and that is how many people see your published content. Now, you're probably thinking, I am not a fortune teller. I cannot see the future. I do not know how many people are going to see this content.
Right.
However, you can go into your past performance and get an idea of, on average, how many people see your posts. And that's something I always recommend tracking. And it's super simple to look up in Google Analytics. Just get an idea of how many people on average see your content. And really take a look at your sponsored content too. Does your non-sponsored content perform the same way that your sponsored content does? So how to measure reach? Very easy. I always use easy math because if anybody heard me on the podcast with Bjork, I cannot do math on the fly. So you start with your potential impressions for a particular channel. So let's say this is going to be for your blog. You have 100,000 users. Next, what is the actual number of views that the content received? 1,500. So your reach there is 1.5%. 1.5% of the potential people actually saw it. So remember, that's what we're kind of looking at as potential versus actual.
Got it. And so for your blog, you'd look at in a given month, let's say you have 100,000 people. But if you publish a blog post and in that month, and that new blog post for the past 30 days, let's say, 5,000 people saw it, that would mean the reach of your blog for that specific post would be 5%. Is that how it works for the blogs? Okay, great. And for social media, it makes sense where if you publish something on Instagram, how many followers do you have? And then how many people actually see that content? So for something like Instagram, where are you able to find that view number in order to get what the reach is for that post? Or is that included?
I think that you have to have the business account set up.
Got it.
To get the analytics. I believe it's still set so that it has to be set as a business account, but they'll give you the specifics on how many people it reached.
Great. Got it.
So the next piece, this is why reach is so important. I want you to take a look at these two examples. First person has, and I'm going to use this as a blog. So the first person has 500,000 views, which is a good audience. Their average post reaches about 1,000, and their sponsored post price is $2,000 per post. Second person has potential impressions of 50,000. So they have 50,000 on average view or users per month, but their average post reaches 3,000 people, and their sponsored post price is $600. If I'm a brand, who do you think I want to hire?
Right. Yeah.
That is definitely going to be the person with the lower price and the higher reach.
Right.
So the key is for you, if you have strong reach, and I can tell you on average, it is about, most blogs range between 1% and 4%.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can look at your numbers and say, oh my goodness, I am at 10% reach for my posts, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really good, and something that you should be telling every potential sponsor. Look, you can get this much from me, even though it looks like I have a smaller audience. Here's why you should hire me.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And point being, the potential for charging a certain amount will be more if the reach is more, especially if your impressions go up. But if you maybe don't have a lot of potential impressions, but you have a high average reach, then that number is going to change a little bit because people are actually seeing the content. That's what's valuable, right? Is when people actually consume it. Got it. Okay.
And if a brand comes back to you and says, look, because the brands are, everybody is still learning in this type of environment. So if a brand comes back to you and says, I have this person over here who's got, 500,000 users, you only have 50,000. Why are you charging 1,200? Let's say this person increased their price. And that's when you can say, because my average posts reach about 3,000 people.
Yeah.
That is this high over the average from what we normally see.
Got it. Cool. That makes a lot of sense. And it's a good motivator for people that are maybe having trouble like pushing their traffic higher to think, okay, maybe I'm not going to push for traffic. Maybe instead I'm going to think about what are ways that I can increase engagement. And so my average reach goes higher. Cool. I
think that the two most important factors that we will talk about today are reach and engagement. Awesome. I think that is truly what brands are looking at now.
Yep. And I just was on a call with somebody that represents a brand, and that's exactly what they said, was they're trying to figure out how many people are actually engaging with this content and how many people are being, how much reach does this content have? They're not as concerned with that, like potential impressions. They're more concerned with reach and engagement. Great.
I think there are still some conversations with brands that happen where they're like, oh, your audience seems too small.
Sure.
That's when, if you know that you have strong reach and strong engagement, that you can really come back to them and say, no, I'm still a perfect fit for you, and here's why. And that's our goal with the framework, is really to put influencers in a position where they can strongly negotiate for why they're worth what their price is.
Yep, that's great. And in terms of how you arrived at those numbers, we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. Is that right? This is just kind of a high level overview. Yep. Okay, great. Great.
So the next part is investment. That is the I. And this is really about the amount of time and money spent creating campaign deliverables. And since I am talking to food bloggers, you have to consider the amount that you are spending on your ingredients. That is a factor. How much time are you spending on editing? Do you have a VA that works for you creating videos? Those are all different factors that we want you to consider. The most important part here is, are you getting a return on your investment? So your profit divided by your overall investment. We want to see that as a positive number. That is the goal, is to see that to be a good figure where you aren't spending more than you're making.
Right.
And if you are, what is it that you need to do to be able to bump that number back up to where it needs to be? Is it that you need to charge more? Is it that you need to try to decrease the time that you're spending on things? Is it that you need to find more efficient ways of creating the content? Those are all different things that you can consider in the investment piece of the framework.
Yeah. An idea being, let's say you get paid $1,000 for a post, but then you spend $100 on groceries and you spend $300 paying somebody for a video, and then you spend 6 hours working on it. You still have a $600 return on investment, which is maybe $100 an hour, which is pretty good. But some people might get a sponsor post for $250 and they spend $100 on groceries and then $300 to hire a VA to do a video, and then the return on investment is negative. So they're not getting any return on it. So it's a good, simple equation to kind of crunch the numbers and see, is this worth it given the time and money that I'm spending on it?
Exactly. And what hourly rate do you think is reasonable
Hmm.
for what you're doing?
Yep.
Because I've seen people who will figure it out and they're like, I'm making $10 an hour. That isn't worth it to me.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, yeah, $50 is worth it to me. I
Hmm.
think that that's reasonable. Then just have a number in mind.
Great.
So remember that the goal is always to get that positive return. So what are the different types of investments? What we talked about is time. How much time are you going to spend on each of the individual deliverables?
Hmm.
Really, really important. What is the campaign source? Remember how I said your pricing shouldn't always be static? This is a really good example. I think that depending upon where your campaign is coming from, you're going to be doing more or less. Remember that it's not just about content creation. If you're working directly with a brand, you are handling pitches, negotiations, contract negotiations, all of the client coordination, plus content creation, the normal part that we think of when we think of sponsored
Yeah.
content and the reporting.
Hmm.
That should be at a higher price because it's taking more of your time.
Hmm.
If an agency is handling it, I always consider agencies to be kind of the mid-level. And that will often depend upon who the agency is that you're working for. It may be just like working with the brand with just a little bit less work than what you would do if you're working direct to brand. You may still need to do reporting. You may still need to do a lot of negotiating in terms of your contract and the type of content that will be created, that type of thing.
Hmm.
But on the bottom end is definitely networks, because most of the time when you get an offer from a network or you're applying for a campaign, they have already figured out exactly what they need. And they are trying to find the right people who fit the campaign that they have already created.
Yeah.
So in those types of campaigns, you're likely doing minimal reporting. It might be like submitting your tracking links, depending upon what platform you're on, and doing the content creation. So just remember, if you are working direct to brand, you're doing more, you should be charging more.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. And so to go back to that slide real quick, the idea is for like just some quick examples here. I'm going to throw these out. Let me know if this is kind of on track. You're saying like for a brand, if you are a blogger and you're working directly with the brand, the point is that's going to be a lot more work because you're going to have to do all these things. You're going to have to pitch and negotiate. You have to do the contract, messaging, client coordination, content creation, reporting. So make sure, related to the slide before this one, that you're factoring that in to your return on investment because of all of the time and energy that goes into it. And then a little bit easier is working with a PR agency, so somebody that is representing a brand, but it's kind of like a little bit of a step down where you're just having to do negotiation, contract, client coordination, content creation, reporting. Maybe you're not having to pitch and not as much messaging. So maybe not quite as much time. And then probably the least amount of time is if you're working with a network. And do you have an example of a network? Like for a while, we worked with a company called Sway, and they have a network called Massive Sway. So is that the idea of these networks that you apply to be a part of, and then they bring you everything and say, here's what you need to do, here's how much you are paid. And so you're not entirely, but for the most part, you're just doing the content creation.
Exactly. And that Sway is a fantastic example. I think they're one of the best known. There's a ton.
Yeah.
There are so many that are out there, but basically they have done, and I used to work for Fitfluential, which is a network.
Yep.
So in those cases, that campaign has already essentially been established.
Yeah.
And it's about casting the right people who are going to be able to create the content that fits with the campaign that's already been envisioned. It's definitely, you're not going to have to work on the messaging. You may go back and forth a little bit to say, no, I think this would work better for my audience. There is some flexibility there, but not a ton. And they, in most cases, are going to handle all of the reporting for you.
Got it. Great. I think that's really helpful to keep in mind.
It's what I always tell people, because way too often I hear people say, they are coming in so far below my rate. And I'm like, I hate this notion of my rate, because that just, it's so set in stone. And I always say, well, where's it coming from? What are they asking you to do? Do you have to do X, Y, and Z? And if people come back and they're like, no, I'm like, if that's your rate for one thing, maybe your rate should be a little bit lower for what's being asked for. And in those cases, I always tell people, how much do you want to work with this brand? If you don't want to work with them and you view it as too low, walk away. But if it sounds like a good deal, don't be so fixated on the idea of my rate that you lose an opportunity that you may want.
Yeah. And we've had that with Pinch of Yum before, where there are brands that are so great to work with. They're really good brand alignment with Pinch of Yum. They allow for a lot of flexibility in terms of the content creation and are hands off. And it's like, oh, we'll be willing to work with them at a lower rate because of how great of a relationship it is. Whereas on the other end, there are some brands where we're like, oh, like we're not going to work with this brand again because of how difficult it was to work with them, how much control they wanted over the messaging. And it's like, it's just not worth it. And so that's an example for us where we have that variable rate depending on what it's like relationally for that brand. And
you can also consider like how many drafts do they want? Are they requesting full editorial control, or is it just that they can change only factual instances? Those are additional things to think about in terms of time. It's not just a blog post, it's drafts, edits. Always consider what is it that you have to do.
Yeah, that's great. Great.
So the next piece is the monetary investment that we talked about. Just think about how much money you're spending on the campaign. And here, please include what you want to pay yourself hourly. Don't forget to pay yourself. What's the book profit first? Think about that. Yeah. Remember that this is a business and you should be making money on this. So don't spend everything and not make a profit. So those are the main things from the investment category. Now I want to talk about content. And content, it's critical. That's what you're doing. It's a sponsored content campaign. And what this particular aspect of the framework is these are the deliverables that you're going to create for the campaign. So whether it's a recipe, a tasty style video, if it's an Instagram photo, what is it that you will actually be doing? 9 times out of 10, every campaign is different. May have one who comes to you who wants a blog post with a video embedded and then 4 or 5 other things. But then the next campaign, which you think is similar, really, if you break it down by the deliverables, is so different. So what we want you to do is first think about separating your content by category. So if it's a blog post, what kind of different blog posts do you have? Do you have an original recipe post? Do you have one that's just talking about a product? Is it a repurposed post? Because I know that that's something that we're seeing a lot more brands have interest in lately.
Yep.
Is it a YouTube video? Is it for Facebook? So think about the different services that you offer. I always tell people, don't get overwhelmed by this. You don't have to come up with every single possibility, but look at the different things that you do. Think maybe your top 5, top 10 different types of content that you create, and then go back and say, okay, what's my reach for this type of thing? What is my investment for this? So then you can start to price it, because what I think is super important is separate content pricing. So when you create your proposal, even if this is just for you to use internally, price your content separately. Here's what that looks like, because I know that that sounds vague and you're probably like, what does she mean? This is what I mean. So, and why does it matter? So let's say you go to a brand and you're like, they tell you they want a blog post, 3 amplification posts. So whether it's just, posting to Facebook or to Twitter, just to drive traffic back, essentially. Some pins and then product features. So Instagram photos, essentially. Not video, not anything like that. And then I always say, include your reporting, because reporting is critical.
Yep.
And that you go to them and you say, this is $800. You know in your head what the value of each thing is worth. What happens if they come back to you and they say, we have $500. What can you do? Way too frequently, way too frequently, I hear bloggers say, you know what? I really want to work with them. Okay, I'll do it.
Sure.
No, please don't do that. What I want you to do is go back to that brand and say, what's most important to you here? What is it that you're using to measure success? Because I want to make this work for your budget. So tell me what's most important. If it turns out that Instagram is not going to be important, cut those Instagram product features. You just shaved $200 off of the price. So go back and have that conversation as to what's important, so that you are still getting paid what you are worth. I hate to see people just do these unilateral discounts. And if you are doing a discount, I really want you to spell that out for them. Say, you're asking me for a 50% discount on what the rate should be. That's a pretty big sale. So say, you know what? I really like you. I want to work with you. I'll give you a 10% discount. Make it somewhat more realistic. And knowing your numbers, knowing where they sort of fall in for what you're being asked to do, gives you a much better place to negotiate. And you can, if you want, depending upon what you're submitting to the brand. So if you're submitting an actual proposal that they're going to see, you can send something like this to them. We regularly did that when I was at the network to say, here's what this campaign breaks down into. And it's roughly this price per service. And if they came back and they said, you know what, here's where our budget is, that's when you can say, okay, let's take a look at the deliverables so that we can go back and forth. Please don't be afraid to negotiate. That's a big thing, I think, in influencer marketing, is people do have a fear of, I don't want to lose the money, so I'm not going to stand up for myself. I think that a few years ago, that may have been, I think brands were more willing to walk away if somebody tried to negotiate. I don't think that's the case now. I think that I see a lot more negotiation happening because there's really, I think brands are really starting to look at, why is this the influencer to spread our message? They want you to help them with something, and they want your audience. So you are in a position where you can negotiate for sure.
I think that's great.
And this is one tool that helps.
And it's nice to be able to have, one of the things that Lindsay and I talk about often is like, to not have you be the conversation point, but to have like the document. And so if you can put something on paper and then say like, here's what we're using, here's our document, and here's the numbers, and it's on paper, as opposed to just kind of talking about it in abstract terms. It's really helpful to have that written out, and it makes it easier to have that conversation. So I really like this. And I
always tell people, no one in the online world likes to hear this, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it. Get on the phone. Get on the phone. You would be amazed at how much more you can accomplish on the phone when it comes to a conversation like this than you can by email.
That's great.
And I know nobody wants to do it. I understand. I get it. So the last piece of the puzzle is engagement. And engagement is any type of native action that your audience can take to interact with your content on a particular platform. And I know that that's like kind of a dense, wordy definition. So I want to make it clear as to what that means. If you're on a blog post, what is it that you can do there on that website that allows you to take action? Think of it as, what is it that really concentrate on the action. So on a blog post, they can click. That's really important to measure. If you're not measuring, please do it. To leave a comment. I think comments used to be the currency on blogs. That was the big thing. But now I think comments are much, much more rare. As we've moved more into a mobile environment. So comments are not weighed quite as heavily. I think clicks are probably more important. And sharing. So are people sharing your content? Because sharing is easy on mobile. Click a button and it's there. So those are the three things you want to make sure that you are measuring. And I will give a quick aside, if you are not measuring your clicks, and that is how many people are clicking to go to the brand's page or to their product or wherever it might be, please start measuring them. It's easy. You can use, I think the two that I usually recommend are Bitly, makes it super simple and it's free. Or you can use, is it Pretty Link Lite is the plugin? There's a lot of different ways to track it. Just have something where you can determine how many people clicked over to that. Because unfortunately, that's one thing that I don't think Google offers. I wish they did.
Yeah, and Bitly is that's the one that we recommend for people that are part of Food Blogger Pro. We have a course on Bitly, but it's a really easy way to set up tracking links. And I would really recommend doing that. And it's a great way to be able to share that information then with brands, where you talk about the reporting side of things, how important it is to do reporting. That's great to be able to do. So if you're not doing that yet, I'd really encourage you to do it. That's a great takeaway.
Yes. And it's one of those things where once you measure it and you have proof of performance, then you can charge more. So it's definitely a benefit.
Great.
So there's two areas of engagement that we usually recommend measuring. First of all is your engagement rate, which is your trackable actions divided by your actual views. And then the second is your cost per engagement. This is, I think, this is really important because this is where I tell people start as a base in terms of your pricing. Your cost per engagement is because, and I say start as a base here, but start as a base only if you know engagement is what your brand cares about. So that needs to be part of the conversation throughout when you're talking to them is, what is it that you're measuring success on? If all they care about is the reach, then you price based on reach. If they say, we want people taking action on the post, then you need to price out engagement. And so you want to do your cost per engagement. So if somebody spent $1,000 on the post, and you get 1,000 engagements. See how I'm keeping the math so simple this time? Mm-hmm. So if you have 1,000 engagements for $1,000, that's $1. Your cost per engagement is $1. I usually tell people stick within the $1 to $1.50 range for your cost per engagement. If it's lower, that's fine. That's only going to encourage brands. But I usually tell people try not to go much higher than $1.50 unless there is something super awesome about your content.
Got it.
And it may be that you have a very super niche audience, or there may be other ways to justify it. And I see people charge more than that regularly, but it all depends. This is just kind of your base place where you can start.
Yep.
And why does it matter? This is right now in the industry what we see as the most commonly used way to measure success. So if you hear people, and I'll throw this around quite frequently, is the KPIs. What are your key performance indicators? If you hear brands talking about that, these are internally what they are using to measure success and how they're determining their own return on investment.
Got it.
So you want to make sure that you know what their KPIs are so that you can then determine if you're the right fit for a campaign and what you should be doing. Because there's a very different, if you are trying to drive newsletter signups versus get views on a recipe, you're going to approach that differently, right? So that I think is key so that you know how they're measuring it so that you can get the appropriate engagement. What action is it that they want you to take or to have your audience take?
Got it. And a question about engagement. So there's lots of different types of engagement.
Yes.
The obvious would be like a like on Facebook or a heart on Instagram or or whatever they call it, comments across the social media platforms. One of the interesting engagement pieces is video views. How would you handle that?
Well, that's when I would say have that conversation with the brand.
Okay.
What is it that actually matters to them most? Is it views? Is it the reach of the video? Or is it the engagement that the video then generates?
Got it.
So I would say, what is it that is more important to you? How many people see it or how many people like it? And I think right now for video, people are more concerned about the reach and how many people have their eyes on it.
Yep.
So their engagement may not matter as much. And there you're going to price based more on the type of reach that you can achieve.
Got it.
So that's where I always say that's why those conversations are super important to have early on, because you don't want to price something based on your engagement and then find out they don't care. What they care about is the actual reach that it is going to achieve. So then you want to make sure that find out what their goals are. If their goal is 100,000 views on something and your normal video gets about 50,000, what kind of investment are you going to have to make to try to get that to 100,000? Or is it a campaign that you need to walk away from because you're not going to be able to succeed?
Got it. And for that, this wouldn't, for the formula you had before, or for the kind of that $1 to $1.50, that wouldn't include views, because those would be something that, you could get 10,000 views and that would really throw that number off. So that would be more of clicks, comments, likes across all of the different places that you share that specific piece of content. Okay.
Exactly.
Got it. Great.
So that is it. Those are the 5 factors for the price method. Remember, it's not static. Always take a look for each campaign. Find out what they're looking for. And this isn't something where you need to spend a half hour analyzing everything, but just know your numbers in the back of your head. What is it? Take the 2 hours to kind of set up your reporting so that you know how much time do I really spend on this? Because sometimes, unfortunately, that's a surprise for people. Find out what is my average cost of engagement? Because if you need to have that conversation with a brand, then you can say, I have a really great cost of engagement. My cost of engagement is only 50 cents. That's outstanding. You're getting a really good bang for your buck for that.
That's great. So for the price method, the way that people would use this is they would go through this. They would look at each one of these potential impressions, reach, investment, content, and engagement. And they would kind of methodically go through each one, crunch their numbers, and then use that to inform the final number that they pick.
Exactly.
And do you have any advice for people, the best way to go through that process?
The best way that I think to go through it is, I like to go through it as a specific. Do you mean to set up a base or to on a campaign by campaign basis?
Yeah, to set up a base.
I'm going to give an answer that is not always popular in creative circles, but is very popular for me, and that's make a spreadsheet. Um, Even if it's a Google sheet on Excel, whatever you're most comfortable with, track 25 or 50 of your posts. Take a look at those posts. And and I know that this sounds like, oh, no fun, but I swear to you, it goes faster than you would expect.
Sure.
Pop in your URL, go into Google Analytics, see how those posts did, see how many comments you had. If you track your clicks, how many clicks did this get? How many engagements did it get? And then you can kind of start to get a better picture of where your averages are. Because I think that that's really important, especially for reach.
Yep.
I see a lot of folks who will say, I have 400,000 views per month. You have 400,000 views because you have this one viral pin that's driving 250,000 of your views each month. Back out the viral stuff. Really get an idea of what your average reach is so that you can then get the best price. And one other thing that I always tell people to do, look at your non-sponsored versus your sponsored content. I personally don't think you should see a difference in how your content performs. And I always hear people say, my sponsored content just doesn't perform the same way. What are you doing differently? Because your audience is there for your voice. They're not going to, I don't think that we're still in the stage where people are like, I don't think this person should make money. I'm going to click off of this. No, thank you. Maybe a few years ago that was the case, but I think that people are accustomed to it now. And so take a look and say, am I not sharing it the same way? Am I not telling a story the same way? Did the brand have too much control over my voice? Because again, those are things that you can then use in your pitching to say, I'll give you some editorial control in this draft. Like you can correct mistakes that I may have made regarding your brand, but you can't change my voice, because that is going to potentially impact the engagement, which impacts the bottom line.
Got it. Yeah. And for these different areas, let's say reach, how do people know where they land in terms of like, is this good or is this not good?
For reach on blog posts, I find that the average, it tends to, the higher your potential impressions are, you tend to see slightly lower reach.
Sure.
So on average, 1% to 4% is what we see. So smaller bloggers may see 4%, whereas a bigger blogger may be around 1%. That's average. If you look and you find that your average reach is at 8%, include that in every pitch that you do. My reach is roughly double industry averages. Perfect. And I'm coming up with those industry averages based upon having analyzed thousands of these. And because I don't think that, unfortunately, we don't have great numbers on what really is industry average. So I think that it's really important, again, have that conversation. How many people are you hoping to put this in front of? And if let's say your potential impressions are 100,000. If they're like, oh no, we expect 100,000 people to see it, that is going to be an education opportunity for you to talk to the brand and say, that is how many people could see it. Most of the time, here's what we see. And it's going to be, this range is roughly what we can expect in terms of performance. Because you don't, particularly if you have a new brand, those can be some tough conversations where they don't know how to measure it. So you can be the expert and kind of guide them through what that looks like and what their expectations should be.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And I think with a lot of these different pieces, what's really helpful is the fact that it provides you the opportunity to have a conversation with brands to say, here's my reach, and or here's the engagement that I have. And that then informs the price point that then you're able to ask for. Do you have any advice for people who will, and I know this will come up, who still say like, so what should my rate be? Like, I know that you said before, the response is like, people shouldn't have a rate, and it depends on a ton of different variables. But like, if people were going to go through and use this in some way where they say, okay, now that I know all of these things for the price method, then how do I use those to get like to the point where it equals this amount? Like obviously you don't like times or like add but what does that look like?
I usually recommend that people start with their engagement and look at the cost per engagement.
Got it.
Since that is how many brands are measuring right now, if you do a lot of video, it's going to be, that may not be as effective for you. But for a blog post, I recommend cost per engagement. Take a look at what your average cost per engagement, or take a look at what your average engagement is, and then start to figure it out. What amount can I charge, not cost?
Yeah.
What amount can I charge that will put me in that $1 to $1.50 range, so that I am not too high? Or if you really want to be attracted to people, what puts me in that 75-cent range?
Yep.
There's one person that I know, her cost per engagement is, I want to say, about 20 cents. And she gets a ton of work, and she's very comfortable with her pricing. I want to say she's in like the $4,000 or $5,000 per post range. And it's because she's got really, really strong Pinterest game.
Yep.
So in that situation, what makes the most sense for you? Because for a lot of people, it's a matter of, I want to charge more for this. How can I justify it?
Yep.
So that's when you can say, start with the cost per engagement.
Got it. And that's across the board again. So blog posts, clicks, comments, social media, clicks on social media. So Pinterest would be a good example of that. If you're able to drive a lot of traffic through clicks to a post, comments, likes, things like that. That's great. I think that's a really good place.
I think it's really important, if you're not measuring those clicks. This is a reason why you should, because that's only going to help you boost those engagement numbers.
Great. That's awesome. Cool. All right. So I feel like this is really informative. It'll give people a lot of next steps that they can take from it. One of the things that we had talked about was that you had an additional resource that you're offering. Can you talk a little bit about what that is? And we'll talk about it as well in the other session that we're doing, but I wanted you to talk about that.
Absolutely. We have a price method workbook that just kind of, because if you were madly taking notes, we have, we call it Know Your Price, that helps you know what the definitions are and helps you work through what some of those equations look like. And you can go to businessease.com/FBP bootcamp and enter your email, and you can get that as a free download.
Great. And then you were nice enough to also be a part of the Q&A session that we're doing at the end. So these are kind of structured in a unique way, and people will see this as we're doing it, but we're going to be in the chat area. That's why we like to do these pre-recorded, so we can chat live during the time that we're doing these. But then also we're going to do a Q&A session at the end of the day. It's 4 p.m. Central Time, and I'm going to try and calculate this in my head. We do it enough because we have a team across the U.S. 3 p.m. It would be 5 p.m. Eastern, and that would be 2 p.m. Pacific. So we're going to do a Q&A session at that point, and we'll have links to that where you can jump in and leave a question ahead of time. So if you have one of those questions, you can go ahead and leave that now, and we'll have the link in the chat area or maybe down below this video. But that's a wrap for this session. So I'm going to stop. And then what's going to happen now is I'm going to also jump on and wrap up this session officially. So great. Thanks for coming on, Danielle.
Thanks.
All right. How about that? Oh, man. Let's all give a huge round of applause to Danielle in the chat area. If you are watching live right now, give her a big round of applause. That was awesome. And I was following along with the chat, engaging with some people there, and really, really high quality content and super actionable as well. So thank you, Danielle, for doing that, for coming on and for sharing that. I wanted to just walk through real quick the businesses that Danielle and Jamie have, so you have a little heads up on that. We have a few more things that we're going to touch on, and then we're going to wrap up this first session here today. So when you can see my screen, let me know by saying got it. And then I will jump in and talk a little bit about what they do, Businessease and #legal. So #legal, as we talked about at the beginning of the course, Jamie and Danielle partner with bloggers, and they create they created a firm specifically for bloggers and social media professionals. That's why she's so knowledgeable and has such actionable information about this, because that's what she does day in and day out. So that's #legal. Be sure to check that out. And then Businessease is the company where they have not as much of the attorney side of things, but they have things like content sponsorship contract. So it's one that's pre-written. It's for bloggers. It's for social media. It's a lot of these things that they're talking about here today. And they have that on Businessease, so be sure to check that out as well. One of the things that I'm super excited about is Businessease has partnered with Food Blogger Pro to offer a discount to all Food Blogger Pro members. And I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to my slides. Want to remind you of a couple things here. Number one, we have some more sessions coming up today. The second session is going to be with Danielle again. She's going to be talking about the 4 marketing tools you need for sponsored content. Then after that, we're going to be talking to the Pinch of Yum team. Lindsay and Jen is going to be coming on, and they're going to be talking about how Pinch of Yum does sponsor content, so you can learn from us how our processes work and the different tools that we use. And then we're going to be doing a Q&A, like we said, at the end of the day. And as a reminder, the replays of these will be available until 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, and that's tomorrow. So you can watch these until then. But then after, what do you do? What should you do after the boot camp? What's the actionable steps? Well, I want to talk a little bit about Food Blogger Pro and the boot camp bundle that we're offering. I'm going to talk about how that works. But before I do that, I want to give you a quick tour of Food Blogger Pro. For those of you that aren't familiar, so you know a little bit about how it works, the behind the scenes, and how that's structured. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is our experts team. So we have Food Blogger Pro experts. These are people that are industry experts in a certain area, and you might recognize some of these people if you listen to the Food Blogger Pro podcast or if you're familiar with what we do. And one of the people that you will recognize for sure is Danielle. She's actually a Food Blogger Pro expert. And what does that mean to be an expert? Well, these are people that are involved with the forums, and they jump in and out when people have questions related to their expertise. Now, obviously, Danielle's not going to be giving you specific legal advice, but for your situation, but she's going to be doing high-level legal advice and advising people when it comes to a contract. Hey, what's something that you should look for? Or maybe you have a question about something specific with an agreement you have with a brand. That's a great place to go if you kind of have a high-level question, and Danielle's one of those experts there. Obviously, if you want to dive deeper, that's where #legal and businessese comes in. But we also have experts like Alana, who's the video specialist at Pinch of Yum. We have Kate from Pinterest and her Pinterest expertise. So all of these people are experts, and they are part of Food Blogger Pro expert team. Where do they show up? Let me show you a little bit about that. They actually show up in the forum area of Food Blogger Pro. So if you are a Food Blogger Pro member, all that you need to do is jump over to the Food Blogger Pro area and the community area on Food Blogger Pro. That page is loading a little bit slow, so I'm going to see if I can do a little refresh to get it to come up faster. And I'll close these out as I do. And with a community area for Food Blogger Pro, what you would do is, if you have questions, if you have ideas, if you have things that you want to run by the Food Blogger Pro team, all that you need to do is jump over and ask those questions on Food Blogger Pro. And it is loading abnormally slow, so I'm just going to let that load in the background. And then I'm going to pull myself up here. And that is the community area of Food Blogger Pro. So that's an area where you would jump in and ask questions. It might be questions about how you would do Pinterest better, or you might have SEO related questions. So if you're somebody that's really interested in figuring out how to have your blog show up a little bit higher in search results, you would do that on the growth and traffic area of Food Blogger Pro. So all of these are different areas that within the community that you can really dive deep into. And the fun thing is that is just one element of Food Blogger Pro. The other element that you can dive into is the course content area. And I'm going to show you both of those things here. I'm going to click over to videos. So on Food Blogger Pro, here's the forum area. So you can see people are asking questions. Hey, what should I do for keywords for SEO? Or people are asking about an Instagram widget that's acting up in Chrome. How can they fix that? Somebody had a photo accepted to Food Gawker, and they're really excited about that. In this case, if you're interested in sponsored content, you'd post to the generating income area. So people talking about how they're creating income from their blogs. So all of those are areas within the community forum. We also have all of these different areas where we have courses and videos. So you can see there's a ton of content. So if you want to learn how to build traffic, we have a bunch of courses on building traffic. We also have previous summits that we've done. So if you want to go back, let's say you don't have time today, you don't have time tomorrow, but you want to consume this content, you want to make sure that you have access to it, we'll have all of that available in the summit area. We previously did a summit on recipe videos, so you could go back and watch that one that we did. But there's also all of these other video areas. We have over 300 videos on Food Blogger Pro where we talk about how you can grow your blog in ways that you can start to create an income from it. So that is the video area for Food Blogger Pro. The last area that I wanted to talk about was there's a couple different areas which I talk about. I'll talk about the live area. We also have the deals and discount, which I'm going to talk about. We have a deal with Business Ease, and we have some tools. But what I'm going to talk about now is the live area. So once a month, we do sessions kind of like this with our Food Blogger Pro team members, and we'll do a Q&A session where people will ask questions and we'll give answers. And that works out really, really well for people that have certain questions about building their blog. And so an example would be, here's one that we did for August. In our August live Q&A, people had questions. Let's see if we can pull it up and see. We use something called Crowdcast for this. I would need to sign in, so I won't sign in for that. But people will ask questions about things like, how do you create sponsor content would be an example. So people ask questions about, hey, if I'm posting sponsor content, what would be a good rate for me to ask for? That would be something that might come up in a Q&A session that we do in the live area. Then we also do this thing called Happening Now, where either Food Blogger Pro team members or I will come on and I'll say, here's some of the things that we're doing that are happening right now that are working really well. Maybe we made a change with a contract agreement that we have with people and how that impacted how much we can ask for sponsor content. Or we maybe implemented a new tool that's really helped us build our blog. Those are all different things that are happening with Food Blogger Pro on an ongoing basis. People have said some really great things about Food Blogger Pro, and we've heard from people that really enjoy it. And we get these emails all the time. Here's an email from Michelle. She said, thanks for all the how-to videos. I would never have known about doing all this stuff for my food blog. I feel like I've gone from preschool to college in regards to being a food blogger, even though I've been blogging for 3 years. Thank you, guys. Jeff said, I truly believe the smartest decision I made was when I decided to go for it and purchase this service. This was a comment that somebody left, and they said, Kelsey was saying, I won't read through all this, or Jen was saying, couldn't agree more. This is by far the best food blogging platform I've found. No matter how small I stay or how big I get, I'll be staying with Lindsay and Bjork's site. They care. That's all that matters to new food bloggers. I won't read through all of this, but somebody who also shared about being a Food Blogger Pro member and that it was a useful investment for them. So we're super excited to have Food Blogger Pro, that community. We're honored to be a part of it, and we'd love for you to be a part of it as well. We're offering something called the Bootcamp Bundle for people that are attending this session. I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. In the Bootcamp Bundle, we also include NutriFox, which is a nutrition label generator for people that have a food blog or a food site. That comes free with the Bootcamp Bundle. We're also doing this thing called Influencer Academy. And with Influencer Academy, we're going to be walking you through the process of creating a media kit, a brand intake form, and a campaign report. All of these really important things that we're going to be talking about in the next session. And we're going to be helping you out move through those and create those. So that's going to be Influencer Academy. We're going to be doing that in December. So if you sign up, that's included for free with the Bootcamp Bundle. So how much does it cost? That's always the question that people will ask at this point. And as you know, courses can be super expensive. I'm sure that you have seen courses that are like $997 or $1,200, or I've seen a lot of courses. I feel like this is always one of those like course price points of $1,997. But for the Bootcamp Bundle, we're doing Food Blogger Pro, NutriFox, Influencer Academy. We're bundling all of those together for $279, which we're really proud to offer that. That allows us to have awesome customer support. It allows us to have a team that supports it, so we're not totally strapped. It allows us to continually create content, but also we feel like it's a really approachable price point. And you can sign up by going to foodbloggerpro.com/bootcamp-bundle, or right down below, there's a button, and you can click on that. That'll bring you to the sign up page for that Bootcamp Bundle. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about that I'm really excited about is we have a deals section on Food Blogger Pro. So if you sign up for Food Blogger Pro, not only do you get all of those things, but you also get a 30% discount on the Business Ease product. So you saw those different products that we were talking about. That's available to Food Blogger Pro members, and we're super excited to offer that as a discount for those different products that they have at Business Ease, which are high quality products that will help your blog continue to grow and will save you a ton of time. We're offering a 30% discount. So thanks to Danielle and Jamie for offering that as a deal for Food Blogger Pro members. Plus, you also get access to the Sponsor Content Bootcamp replays, and that will be available ongoing as long as you're a member. So if you don't have time to watch all of these, to dive in, to take notes on them, that's going to be available after. We'll have access to these ongoing for any members. The cutoff for this is Tuesday, September 26th. So it's not an ongoing deal that we have. It's just for the next 2 weeks that we're offering it. And then one last reminder here to submit your questions. So if you have questions for the end of the day Q&A, you can go ahead and submit those. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm also going to field any questions that you have relating to Food Blogger Pro. So what I will do here is I'll hold on for a little bit. If you have questions specifically about Food Blogger Pro, I'll go ahead and answer those. And Alexa is dropping that link in. And this is from Kitty. Really appreciate this. So she said, joining FBP is the best decision I made last November. No idea what to do next. FBP helped me get focused. Thanks, Kitty. That's super nice to leave that in the chat. So if you have any questions about Food Blogger Pro, you can drop those in the chat area. I would be happy to hit those right now. Otherwise, I'm going to be hanging out just for a little bit longer. Sage as well. Sage has joined me for this Q&A session. You can see she is truly the greatest. And the URL for that, again, it's just right down below. So if you want to check that out, it's foodbloggerpro.com/bootcamp-bundle. But otherwise, thanks to Danielle for coming on and for being a part of not the podcast, but the session today. And we have a couple of questions coming in here. So the free workbook, let's go ahead and drop that link in. And as a reminder for those that are interested, and we have a question coming in from sign up. Sign up will be available for 2 weeks. So this is a private enrollment period. So if you go to foodbloggerpro.com right now, you can see that it's not available for sign up, but we do sign up periods on a limited basis. So once every 3 months we'll have a sign up period, kind of like a university or a college. So September 26th, 2 weeks from today, is when signups will close. People in the Food Blogger Pro community that have technical advice on things like removing malware from your site. So we have 2 community experts that are really good at that, Andrew and Lauren, and they focus on site speed as well as security. And they also have a lot of background in WordPress and development. So those would be the best people to answer those types of questions. They won't do it for you. They'll give you advice on what you can do. But also, if you aren't able to figure it out, they are great resources for people to hire as well. So first, you can try and figure it out on your own. If you can't figure it out, then they're great people to work with. In Search of Yummy says, if we join now with the bootcamp bundle deal, will that price be ongoing or does it renew in a year at a different price? So that's the same price. So it's not like it'll jump up to $1,000 later on. $279. We've had that price for 5 years now, and that's something that we'll continue to have and we'll continue to offer. So I'm going to try and keep my mouth to the mic here when I look away at the other questions that are coming in. So thank you for that feedback. If you are already a Food Blogger Pro member, do you need to enroll for the Influencer Academy in December? Nope. So if you're already a Food Blogger Pro member, that's part of the Master Class series. So you'll need to be a yearly member in order to access the Master Class. So the only thing you'd need to do is update to a yearly member if you're a monthly member, but otherwise it's available. It's not something that's just available to people for the Bootcamp bundle. How much will not be located? So Laura says, how much will not being located in the US affect the value I get out of Food Blogger Pro? Are the live things early enough to attend at European times? Great question. So we do the live events at noon Central. So it's hard to say where you land and if that's okay and how that works out. But noon Central Standard Time or Central Daylight Savings Time is when we do those. But also the replays are available. So if you can't make it, replays are available. And we also do it in a way where you can submit a question ahead of time. So if you submit a question ahead of time, you can check that out after, and we'll answer that question on the call. Maureen says, when been wanting to sign up for Food Blogger Pro forever, especially since I met you and Lindsay at Sustainable Seafood Blog Conference. Whoa, what a fun connection. Looking forward to it, and thanks for this today. So Maureen, thanks for that. Will there be offers on FBP in the future? Can't afford that now. Yep. So like I said, sign up for the waiting list. If you're a part of that, every 3 months or so, we do an enrollment period. And we have a few more questions coming in. Let's see. Let's see here. Other questions. I think that's it. Great. So thanks for checking this out today. Thanks for being a part of it. And then I see one more question coming in. So Influencer Academy, kind of a rundown of how that will work. So with Influencer Academy, what we're really focusing in on is we're saying, how can we help you build the core foundational elements on the like media kit side of things. So we'll have a media kit template that you'll be able to use. So we'll send that out. So you'll be able to drop in the information that you have for that. We'll work through that process of getting that into place. We'll also talk about an intake form. So at some point in your blog, probably not the early stages, but as you start to get bigger, brands will start to reach out to you. So we'll talk about how you can be intentional about building an intake form, and we'll walk through that process. And then the last thing that we'll do is we'll send out a template for a campaign report. So we're going to be talking about that in the next session, but we're going to be talking about how you can build a campaign report, be really intentional with putting in the elements that you need for a campaign report. It's going to be a 3-week process. We're going to focus on each one of those things in each week. So first, media kit, diving into that, putting together a media kit. Second thing would be that campaign intake reform. And the last thing would be building the campaign report, which is such an important piece. So that's how Influencer Academy will work. It'll be a 3-week course. It'll be focusing on each one of those for each week, making sure that you'll be able to work with us, the Pinch of Yum team and the Food Blogger Pro team, in order to get that set up and ready to go. Again, if you want to join Food Blogger Pro, you can go to that URL, or there's the button down below. We're going to be back here in about 40 minutes for the second session of the day, and we are really excited to continue the learning. Isn't this cool? We can all tune in from wherever we are around the world. And one more really big thank you to Danielle from Businesses and #legal. Obviously, Jamie is a part of that team as well. You guys are awesome. So if you have any questions in the in-between, go ahead and submit those for the end of the day Q&A session. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and excited to keep this going today. All right. Peace out.